which villain actually had a good motivation?
Roy Batty. He just wanted to extend his life beyond the mandatory termination date. Trill was the real villain. Also, the principal from Ferris Bueller. Bueller was doing exactly what he suspected he was doing, and is kind of an arrogant prick the entire time.
TBF, the principal went and broke into his house. That was crossing a line.
The hyenas from The Lion King. Hunger is a powerful motivator.
Wow, never thought this through before. I always stopped at Scar as the villain with the motives and the hyenas are just the henchmen, or hunch hyenas. The parallel with the Nazism is even more striking now. It's just a hungry mob who did what they thought was the best way to escape their miserable condition.
The older you get, the more you understand that Scar was basically an aging emo fuck-up with delusions of grandeur, and not the master planner you thought he was as a kid. Like, when you were a kid, you did think that he was brains to Mufasa and Simba's brawn. Maybe not a great guy, but still an impressive player. And then you age into watching that image just become Scar's narcissistic delusion. Mostly, he whined about not having a ring just handed to him on a silver platter, and he never once made plans regarding what he would do with the crown once he had it. He just wanted things he had neither the claim or acumen for having. Into his middle age. When he did manage to take the throne, he was a shitty ruler. He alienated his competent subjects by treating them like slaves and tried to cultivate an alliance with idiots who were never going to be fully loyal to him by giving them free rein to sack his land. Even when challenged, he almost took out his rival's brat, but spiked that and got himself killed because he needed to brag about it. Scar was a freaking screw-up who got lucky a few times and spent most of his life making sad, self-indulgent speeches to mice before he ate them.
Waterness from Monsters Incorporated. His world was on the brink of an energy crisis. He was just trying to find new ways to get that good scream energy.
This was true until he chose to stand in the way of renewable, sustainable energy sources to protect his own company's short term. He researched better scream extraction when he should have had a bigger RAND budget devoted to finding new paradigms entirely.
Monsters Inc. is an accurate analysis of every oil company in existence.
Dr. Harbaugh. He saw the lies that were being spread, the fact that those in charge were harming humanity, and wanted to make a change which, okay, put him in charge, but also lead to actual change for the people. Also, Captain Hammer is an asshole.
The machines in the Matrix. The Second Renaissance showed that it was humans who struck first and tried to destroy the sentient machines once they became intelligent. The machines removed themselves from society and created their own City 1-0 in the middle of the desert to try to allay human fears, but it still didn't work. Humans were the aggressors. The machines wanted to protect themselves. And the machines are not even evil. Instead of just exterminating humans or chopping off their heads and using their bodies as batteries, they took the trouble to create a massive virtual world for us. They even tried making it a paradise at first, according to Agent Smith, but we rejected it, so they went more realistic.
Ed Harris's character in The Rock. Ex-vet wanted a decent funeral for some of his fallen comrades, plus I think a $100 million compensation for their families. Spoiler alert, the president said no.
Ironic, since they paint him as an enemy, yet it's a thing that Americans do want for their veterans and their families. He was a man who originally went through all the proper legal avenues only to be ignored by the country he gave a pound of flesh for and had no other choice to be listened to.
Anakin Skywalker just wanted to save his mom, then his wife. Fear is a powerful motivator, and Palpatine knew this. Obviously, the genocide is inexcusable.
He only wanted to protect those he loved, nothing else.
Mysterio in Far From Home. When he first started explaining his motivations, I was like, yeah, fuck Tony Stark. The only thing that made him come across as evil was how his ego caught up to him, as far as I remember.
Still, most people don't try and kill innocent people to get back at their boss, who's already dead. It's a overboard reaction.
Most 90s/early 00s romantic comedy, where the villain is simply the person already in a relationship with the object of the main character's affection. For instance, take Roy from The Office. He was a bit of a doofus and not the perfect partner, but he loved Pam and wanted to start a life with her. Jim, the protagonist, falls in love with someone who is engaged, and we're supposed to be delighted that he gets the girl in the end. We're also supposed to be mad at Roy for wanting to punch him? Nah. I would want to punch him too.
Roy was a terrible partner for Pam. The reason you want them to break up that she deserves better than him. He realizes that eventually and improves himself, which is seen in Roy's wedding episode.
Well, yes, often we want the original couple to break up. But having an outside person initiate a cheating plot is not the best way to go about that.
Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes, he was a miser and treated his employee poorly, though not much worse than many are treated now, but he was a sad, broken man who has a life of loss and rejection, and through it all, money was the only thing that he could count on. After his education and attitude adjustment at the hands of the Christmas spirits, he became a joyful, loving, helpful person and an example of goodness and generosity to the community. People forget that.
Ebenezer is such a weird name.
Vader the Jedi were basically puppets at this point. They talked about being all for peace and whatnot, but the Senate votes for war and they're completely okay with being the generals in this war. They were okay with taking command of an army made up of an entire race of slaves bred specifically for military service, who will be executed if they leave. They pretend they're for democracy, but in the Clone Wars series one planet decides of its own volition to join the Separatists, and the Jedi and their slave army shows up to murder them for this decision. And you look at the Separatist argument, the Senate is corrupt. Yeah, they had that one spot on. Sure, the Separatists were also being led by the same people corrupting the Senate, but that doesn't negate their argument. And also, the whole slave thing, it runs a lot deeper than you probably realize. The Jedi themselves are basically a self-perpetuating group of slaves. They take kids at an early age and indoctrinate them, and if they leave they are shunned, if not straight up murdered. In Episode 1, Qui-Gon says something like, "I didn't come here to free any slaves," and this general thought comes up a few times. At the time it sounds like an in-the-moment description of their current situation, but looking at the bigger picture I think it is more indicative of the overall Jedi position on slavery. So is it really any surprise that the guy who was a slave as a kid turns against these assholes?
Dr. Doom. He has literally, like without a shadow of a doubt, seen every single outcome of every single decision he has or will ever make, and the only way humanity survives is if he rules them and takes them on a certain path. Yet the fucking Fantastic Four keep on beating his ass down. His rule isn't even that bad, even in the context of A Great Leap Forward. The FF just don't like him because he's just a power-hungry single leader, and being that and ruling the earth has historically been bad. But you know what all those other populist leaders didn't have? Literal demonstrable clairvoyance and superintelligence.
The King of Atlantis and Aquaman. Sure, he failed in human biology and culture 101 and the very basic communication principle of freaking talk to people. Basically, he misunderstood human lifespans and assumed they remembered thousand-year-old political treatise and moved to a violent response too quickly. But beside those personal failings, he was trying to be a good ruler and keep his people safe. From his perspective, humans did attack first. Aquaman is equally good here, as he was also defending his home. Both were meathead heroes who should have used words. The villains in Aquaman were the advisor and the king's fiancé who betrayed their oaths and their kingdom for personal reasons. Both are guilty of treason and the highest kinds of betrayal. I felt really bad for the king in that movie.
Vulture's motivation seemed to be the evil government decided that my throw things in the back of a pickup truck cleanup operation might not have adequate safety and security in place to be handling and securing alien goddamn technology. So I'm going to steal alien technology and sell it to black market terrorists and criminals. I get that he wanted to provide for his family and all, but he would have to be extremely stupid to think it would be legal for HM to handle those materials, regardless of whatever contract he got from his city.
His motivation was that Stark Industries was lobbying the government to be awarded contracts to clean up the mess that the Avengers create, thus forcing small business, blue-collar people like Dooms out of business. On top of that, Tony Stark is now profiting from the very damage that he himself is causing. In his view, it just further demonstrates how the rich and powerful can take advantage of the system, while honest workers like himself and his crew are left to fend for themselves. He knew he couldn't keep the stuff he cleaned up, but kept it anyway in order to create gadgets to sell on the black market in order to stay afloat.